As we come closer to the Ryzen 7000 series CPU's launch, some companies like Noctua can be seen preparing itself for the AM5 LG1718 socket. On the other hand, we have Intel making the Arc GPU launch too much confusing with the GPU names and is reportedly going to launch one more GPU. We also have the new AMD Ryzen CPU's reviews out, which are suggesting that the Ryzen 4500 is a very bad CPU. And lastly, it has also come to the light that the new Radeon software is manipulating your Ryzen CPU without your consent. We will talk about that later, so stay till the end and subscribe if you don't want to miss any latest PC hardware stories. As we know that the Ryzen 7000 series CPUs are going to use the AM5 platform, which is an LGA socket, and therefore you can expect some little changes. However, as we know from the previous reports, AM5 package has the same size as of AM4, which means that most AM4 compatible CPU coolers can work out of the box on AM5 without any AM5 kit. Noctua has recently released the details on their cooler support on AM5 in their press release, which tells us that all the AM4 compatible coolers are going to work on AM5 out of the box if they were purchased after January 2019, but older models will require an upgraded mounting kit which Noctua is providing for free. However, there are two coolers that are not going to be compatible without the AM5 kit. These are the NH-L9A AM4 and the NH-L9I, which are the low profile CPU coolers that need a backplate change. Noctua said that they are preparing a mounting kit for both of these, which will be provided for absolutely free of cost. Now we already know that Intel has launched the Arc GPU family for the gaming laptops. Currently the A350M and A370M are the first GPUs to be seen on gaming laptops, with the Arc A550M, A730M and A770M following them in 2 months. Now for the desktop, Intel initially planned to launch two Arc GPUs, one with 8Xe cores and one with 32Xe cores. But a new leak suggests that the GPU with 16Xe cores might also launch with these two. This GPU is supposedly the DG2 256 card. This name appeared in Intel's graphics compiler for OpenCL as well as Ubuntu operating system in a newly released patch, which was seen on the day of Arc release for the laptops. However, Intel is confusing everyone with the names. We already know the GPU names like DG2 512 or DG2 128, but it has more names like SoC1 or DG2 G10 for the DG2 512 GPU. Intel has one more name for it, which is the ACM G10. Also, we have names like Arc A380, A780, etc. So we officially have around 5 names for each GPU, which is unnecessary and confusing for everyone. Maybe Intel should just call them with the names like A380, A550, etc. because that way they can be heard like Nvidia and AMD GPUs. Next up, we have the reviews out for the new Ryzen CPUs based on Zen 3 and Zen 2 architectures. HotHardware.com published and compared the results of Ryzen 5700X, 5600 and other new CPUs with the already existing Ryzen CPUs, where we can see that the 5600 and 5600X are almost equivalent in gaming performance, and the same goes for the 5700X and 5800X, with the latter having some advantages in the CPU intensive applications. However, the Zen 2 CPU Ryzen 4500 is looking very bad on the charts. If we consider its gaming performance, it is far behind every other CPU on the list, including the Ryzen 5500. This performance gap can be only seen at 1080p resolution, but at 4K, the performance comes very close to the other CPUs. The processor still sucks in my opinion, as nobody will buy the 4500 for gaming at 4K, and at a cost of $129, it is far worse than the Core i3-12100 CPU. This clearly shows that you cannot just release a dozen CPUs however you want, especially when you have a very tight competition going on. Finally, we have a controversial report about the new Radeon Adrenalin software version 22.3.1, which is changing the CPU settings without users' consent. Now, since its release, the Ryzen Master module is integrated into this driver. Ryzen Master is used for overclocking Ryzen CPUs and memories, where you can save your profiles. According to Igor Velosek from Igor's lab, when an older GPU profile is loaded, the Adrenalin software activates the precision boost, and by this way, the manual overclocking settings of the CPU are overridden in the BIOS. Here you can see that the CPU boost clock override was enabled in the negative mode with -50 MHz. The PBO changes the boost clock override from enabled to disabled, which takes the boost clock back to 4850 MHz. It also changes the PBO limits from motherboard to manual, and we completely have a new set of settings which can cause trouble for the user. Hopefully AMD fixes that soon, but if you want a quick fix, a Reddit user recommends creating a new user profile for the GPU. This won't affect your CPU settings at all. So that rounds up the interesting stories for today. I hope you liked the video, and if you did, then make sure you also watch this video right here, which is about the RTX 3090 Ti PCB, which is supposedly going to be a test bench for RTX 4090 for the AIBs. Also, make sure you get subscribed to the channel if you don't want to miss any PC hardware stories. And I will see you next time.